My name is Sarah, and I'm 42 years old. This is the story of how I broke everything I loved. It started with a glance, a touch, a moment I should have walked away from. I was a mother, a wife, a woman who thought she knew herself, until Jake, my daughter's boyfriend, looked at me like I was more than the shadow I'd become. The first time I noticed him, it was an accident. The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary, but all I could focus on was him. Jake, my daughter Emily's new boyfriend, sat across from me, his broad shoulders straining against a fitted black shirt. His dark eyes flickered with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, and when he smirked, it sent a jolt through me, sharp, unfamiliar, and entirely unwelcome. Emily was prattling on about her college classes, her voice a cheerful hum as she leaned into Jake's arm. My husband Tom nodded along, oblivious to the way Jake's gaze kept drifting to me. I was pouring wine, the bottle trembling slightly in my hand when it happened. Jake reached for his glass, and his fingers brushed mine. The contact lingered, too long, too deliberate. His skin was warm, calloused, and the sensation sent a shiver up my arm. Our eyes locked, and his were dark, knowing, as if he could see the thoughts I was trying to bury. Did he mean to do that? I pulled my hand back, heat creeping up my neck. I was 42, a mother, a wife. This was absurd. I busied myself with clearing plates, avoiding his stare, but the weight of it followed me. Later, as Emily and Tom laughed over dessert in the living room, I was in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with a ferocity that bordered on manic. The clink of glassware was the only sound until I heard his footsteps. "You're even more beautiful up close," Jake said, his voice low, rough, like gravel underfoot. He was leaning against the counter, too close, his body radiating heat. I froze, sponge in hand, water dripping onto the floor. My mouth opened to protest, but nothing came out. His eyes roamed over me, bold and unapologetic, and I felt exposed, like he could see every crack in my carefully constructed life. "You shouldn't say things like that," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Why not? It's true." I should have walked away. I should have told him to leave, to never come back. But I didn't. And when we returned to the dining room, his hand found my thigh under the table, hidden by the tablecloth. His touch was firm, possessive, sliding higher until my breath caught. I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. That night, alone in my bedroom, Tom snoring softly beside me, I replayed it all. Jake's rough hands, the way he looked at me like I was the prize, not Emily. Guilt clawed at my chest, sharp and relentless. I was betraying my daughter, my husband, myself. But desire was louder, a primal drumbeat that drowned out everything else. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A number I didn't recognize, but the message was unmistakable. "Meet me tomorrow, just us." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I knew it was wrong. I knew it could destroy everything. So why did I type yes? The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror, the red lace lingerie stark against my skin. It was a relic from a Valentine's Day years ago, when Tom still noticed me. Now, it felt like a secret weapon, a declaration of something I couldn't name. I slipped on a simple black dress, the kind that wouldn't raise questions, and drove to the address Jake had sent. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I didn't turn back. His apartment was in a nondescript building on the edge of town, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. The hallway smelled of stale cigarette smoke, and when I knocked, the door swung open almost immediately. Jake stood there, shirtless, his jeans slung low on his hips. He didn't speak, just grabbed my wrist and pulled me inside, kicking the door shut. Before I could think, he pushed me against the wall, his body hard against mine. "I've wanted this since the first time I saw you," he growled, his lips brushing my ear. His hands were everywhere, tugging at my dress, sliding under the lace, exploring with a hunger that made my knees weak. I gasped as his fingers found me, teasing until I was trembling, my body betraying every ounce of restraint I'd tried to muster. "Jake," I whispered, half protest, half plea. But he didn't stop, and I didn't want him to. He lifted me, my legs wrapping around his waist, and carried me to the bed. His touch was raw, unyielding, and when he finally filled me, it was like a dam breaking. Every touch, every thrust, was a rebellion against the life I'd been living, safe, predictable, suffocating. It was wrong, so wrong, and I couldn't get enough. Afterward, I lay beside him, my skin slick with sweat, my heart racing with equal parts exhilaration and dread. Jake propped himself on one elbow, tracing lazy circles on my stomach. "You're incredible," he said, his voice soft but laced with that same arrogance I'd noticed at dinner. I wanted to believe him, to bask in the feeling of being wanted, but the reality of what I'd done was creeping in like a cold fog. I dressed quickly, avoiding his gaze. "This can't happen again," I said, more to myself than to him. He smirked, unbothered. "Sure it won't." As I drove home, my phone buzzed. Emily's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach lurched. "Mom, Jake's acting weird. Did he say anything to you?" The words blurred as panic set in. What had he done? What had he said? My blood ran cold, the high of the afternoon replaced by a sinking dread. Had I just walked into a trap? I deleted Jake's texts, every damning word erased with a trembling thumb. The red lingerie went into a garbage bag, buried deep in the bin outside. I scrubbed my skin raw in the shower, as if I could wash away the memory of his hands. But no amount of soap could erase the truth. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. For days, I avoided Jake's calls, ignored the messages that grew bolder, more insistent. More time," he texted, the words burning into my retinas. I wanted to block him, to pretend none of it had happened, but the fear of what he might do, what he might say, kept me tethered to him. Emily was quieter than usual, her eyes red-rimmed when she came over for coffee one morning. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice too bright, too forced. She shrugged, stirring her mug. "Jake's been distant. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it." My heart thudded in my chest, but I forced a smile. "You're probably just stressed. He seems like a good guy." The lie tasted like ash. That afternoon, Jake showed up at the house. Emily was in the shower and I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. He slipped in quietly, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "Miss me?" he murmured, his lips brushing my neck. I flinched, stepping back. "Get out," I hissed, glancing toward the hallway. "This is over." His smirk was infuriating, like he knew something I didn't. "Is it?" His hand grazed my hip, and for a fleeting moment I wavered, the memory of his touch pulling me under. But then I heard the shower shut off and reality snapped back into focus. "Leave," I said, my voice shaking. He chuckled, but he left. The door clicking shut just as Emily emerged, towel drying her hair. That night, my phone rang. Tom's name lit up the screen, and his voice was like ice. "Emily found something on Jake's phone. She's devastated." My stomach dropped, the knife I'd been holding clattering to the counter. "What? What did she find?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Pictures," he said, each word a blade. "Messages. She won't tell me everything, but she's coming over tomorrow to talk. Pictures. Messages." The room spun as I realized what it meant. Jake hadn't just betrayed Emily, he'd kept proof. Had he planned this all along? Was I about to lose everything? The next morning, the house felt like a battlefield. Every creak of the floorboards a warning shot. Emily arrived just after breakfast, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Tom sat at the kitchen table, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on me in a way that made my skin crawl. I wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Emily didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "How could you?" The words hit like a physical blow. "Emily, don't," she snapped, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the texts, the pictures, you and Jake." Her voice rose to a scream, raw and jagged. "You slept with him?" The room went silent, the air sucked out of it. Tom's face was a mask of betrayal, his hands clenched into fists. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. I opened my mouth but no words came. What could I say? The truth was a grenade and it had already gone off. Emily threw her phone onto the table, the screen displaying a photo. Me. In Jake's apartment, my dress hiked up, his hands on me. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. "I trusted you," Emily said, her voice cracking. "You're my mother. I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "A mistake?" she spat. "You ruined everything." Tom stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "We'll talk later," he said to me, his tone final. He put an arm around Emily, guiding her out of the room, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my choices. I sank to the floor, the weight of their pain crushing me. The texts, the photos, they were out there, undeniable. Jake had played me, and now my family was paying the price. But as the tears fell, a spark of anger ignited. Jake thought he could control this, control me. He was wrong. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Meet me now." The streetlights flickered as I pulled into the empty lot behind the old warehouse Jake had chosen for our meeting. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and diesel, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. My phone sat heavy in my hand, Jake's last message glowing on the screen. "You know you want to see me." His arrogance was a taunt, a reminder of how easily he'd played me. But tonight wasn't about desire. It was about ending this. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking against the pavement. The warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted door ajar. I'd told myself I was here to confront him, to demand he delete the photos, to make him pay for what he'd done to Emily. But deep down, I wasn't sure what I was capable of. The guilt that had been clawing at me for weeks had hardened into something else. Rage, sharp and unyielding. Inside, the warehouse was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb. Jake stood in the center, leaning against a stack of crates, his smirk as infuriating as ever. "Didn't think you'd show," he said, his voice low, teasing. He stepped closer, his eyes raking over me like they had that first night. "Miss me?" "Stop," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "This ends now. Delete the photos, leave Emily alone, leave me alone." He laughed, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "You think you get to call the shots? You wanted this, Sarah. You begged for it." He pulled out his phone, waving it like a weapon. "These pictures? They're my insurance. You try to screw me over and everyone sees them. Tom, Emily, your whole perfect little neighborhood." My stomach twisted, but I held his gaze. "You're a coward," I said, stepping closer. "You used me to hurt her. Why? What did Emily ever do to you?" His smirk faltered, just for a second, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, something dark, wounded. "Emily's too good for me," he said, almost to himself. "Always was. But you?" He leaned in, his breath hot against my face. "You were easy." The words stung, but they also clarified everything. Jake wasn't just a predator. He was a man unraveling, lashing out at the world through me. I'd been his pawn, but I wasn't anymore. "You're wrong," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not easy, and I'm not yours." Before he could respond, I pulled the small recorder from my pocket and hit play. His voice filled the warehouse, every damning word from our earlier calls, his taunts, his threats, his admission of keeping the photos to control me. I'd been careful, saving every message, every voicemail, building a case. His face paled as he realized what was happening. "You recorded me?" he snarled, lunging for the recorder. I stepped back, holding it out of reach. "Back off, Jake. I've already sent copies to a friend. You try anything, and this goes to the police. Blackmail, harassment. You'll be done." He froze, his chest heaving, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tight. "Delete the photos. Every single one. Then leave town. If I ever see you near Emily again, I'll make sure you regret it." He hesitated, then grabbed his phone, his fingers moving quickly. "Fine," he muttered, showing me the screen as he deleted the images, one by one. I watched, my heart racing, until the last one was gone. But I wasn't naive enough to trust him completely. I'd already hired a tech specialist to scrub any backups he might have. This was just the start. "Now go," I said, my voice like steel. He glared at me, but the fight had gone out of him. He turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. I stood there, alone in the warehouse, the recorder still clutched in my hand. The adrenaline drained away, leaving me hollow. I'd won, but at what cost? When I got home, the house was dark. Tom's car gone. A note on the kitchen table read, "Staying at a hotel. We need space." My knees buckled, and I sank into a chair, the silence deafening. Emily hadn't answered my calls or texts since the confrontation, and the image of her tear-streaked face haunted me. I'd destroyed my family, and no amount of vengeance against Jake could fix that. The next morning I drove to Emily's apartment, my heart in my throat. She opened the door, her eyes red but dry, her expression guarded. "What do you want, Mom?" she asked, her voice flat. "To talk," I said, my voice breaking. "Please." She hesitated, then stepped aside, letting me in. The apartment was small, cluttered with textbooks and coffee mugs, a stark reminder of the life she was building, one I'd nearly ruined. We sat on the couch, the space between us a chasm. "I'm so sorry," I began, tears spilling over. "What I did was unforgivable. I was lost, Emily. I felt invisible, and Jake, he saw me. But that's no excuse. I betrayed you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." She looked away, her jaw tight. "I trusted you," she said, her voice barely audible. "You were my mom, and you chose him." "I know," I said, my voice raw, "and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. If you want me to stay away, I will. If you want me to fight for you, I'll do that too. Just tell me what you need." She was quiet for a long time, her hands twisting in her lap. Finally she looked at me, her eyes softer but still distant. "I need time," she said. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet." It wasn't absolution, but it was a start. I nodded, wiping my tears. "I wait," I said. "As long as it takes." Tom was harder. When we met at a coffee shop a week later, he looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper. "I can't unsee it, Sarah," he said, his voice heavy. "Sarah, you broke us." "I know," I said, my throat tight. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did this, how I let it happen. I want to be better. For Emily, for myself. Maybe one day, for you." He studied me, his expression unreadable. "I need time too," he said finally. "I don't know what's next." It was a fragile thread, but I clung to it. The road to redemption would be long, and I might never reach the end, but I'd walk it anyway. Months later, I stood in my new apartment, a small, sunlit space I'd rented after Tom and I agreed to separate. Emily had started texting me again, short messages about her classes or a funny meme, each one a lifeline. Tom and I were civil, meeting occasionally to sort out logistics, but the warmth was gone. Maybe forever. Jake was gone, vanished from town as promised. The tech specialist confirmed the photos were destroyed, and the recorder was my insurance, locked in a safe. But the real work was inside me, untangling the loneliness, the desperation that had led me to him. Therapy was painful, peeling back layers of shame and self-loathing, but it was also a lifeline, a way to rebuild. I wasn't whole, not yet, but as I looked out at the sunrise, a cup of coffee warming my hands, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and for the first time, I believed I could. Thanks for sticking by to this extent. Want more unfaithful and cheating stories? Hit the subscribe button, like, and share for more.